Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to, I guess, version 4 of the launch for White Harbor. Book 3. We had tried to do this the usual way on Instagram Live, but it just kept booting everyone out, so we gave up. And we decided to come along here and do a proper launch this way. So, welcome, Carlos. Thank you for your patience. And
Thank you for setting this up.
And
I
also,
appreciate it.
thank you for giving up the mecca of video games, Silent Hill 2 remake or something.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, look, this is the book, okay? And I'm going to show this a couple of times. We have already talked a little bit on Instagram about the length and about the editing process and how I've noticed your huge growth as an author. Um, between the first book to this book, and we also talked a little bit about the all the different threads that you have going on between all the three books, and finding a way to provide some closure, one way or the other, to each of those threads, and how long that must have taken you. And I think you were talking about that the last time that we all got booted out. So maybe that's a great place for us to start.
Okay. So that sounds good. So, all right. So, since probably people would start watching from this point, just to say the same thing I said when you mentioned the thing about the editing. Uh, what since it's the last book in the trilogy, one of the things that I was the most nervous about was it, not turning out okay. So I was very happy getting your comments that that it barely needed any editing, that it was really good, that it felt it was epic, that it was a page turner. So those words I was not expecting at that point in the editing process. So it meant a lot to me. So I just wanted to say thank you. Now, about the thing about the different threads in the story, what I was explaining before was that this started as a very short story that I wrote over 20 years ago. And that story only focused on Peter's side of the story, on the main character side of the story. And it was a very short one. As I started thinking of other stories that I could do or write, I started noticing that there were these connective threads, like little things that were people dealing with cycles of trauma and whether they broke those cycles or not. And it was that connective tissue where I started seeing, like, hey, I might have something here in which I can just not do this one little story, but do the story for all of these characters in a way in which the
Mm.
thematic point of the story is people dealing with cycles of trauma and basing it in this town, White Harbor. Um, so I could say that it took me about 20 years to plan it all because each of those stories I was planning like individually. And then it was around COVID that I started putting everything together now in a cohesive way that would make this entire trilogy. So I'm hoping that people find the conclusion to each of those threads satisfactory. And what I would say is that I have given quite a lot of thought to each. So I hope people like them.
Well, it shows that you've given a lot of thought to every single one of them. Um, I don't think there was anything in there that I was not satisfied with. I mean, some things obviously saddened me, but that can be satisfying as well, if you know what I mean. It's still an ending, and it's still, wow, that's what happened is really messed up, but at least I know what happened to them. So yeah, I think you've done a really, really nice job of tethering everything together and exploring each of those threads, giving them enough time to and space to exist on their own, as well as within the greater context of the story. And that's not easy to do. So I think you've done an amazing job on that.
Thank you. And one of the toughest things about doing that, I guess, is that it since there are three books, you know that you're going to have these characters that probably in book one or book two might not have that much to do. So you
Yeah.
might be wondering, like, so okay, so why is this person part of the cast? Is this person canon fodder? Is this person just, going to drop dead at any second? And
Yeah.
the idea is that I wanted to make sure that during books 1 and 2 that those people were at least integrated enough into the story, because I knew that they would have their time to shine later on, while other people that might have had greater roles earlier on might have had them reduced, but still everything tying up into the entire narrative leading up to the
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you've done a great job with that. I think for me, one of the things that I love about the trilogy in general is that every character feels real. So even with those small characters who, you might just have one of those vignettes that you do, um, or they might be Nadine or Peter or, Royce or someone like that. They all feel real. And it's not just a case of just putting someone in there so you can have a disturbing scene, which does happen sometimes, particularly in films. So yeah, I definitely appreciated that.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a little of that in the scenes in which I focus on the town, because one of the my main goals from book 1 was always giving this sense of, yes, we're focusing on this group of people, but it's an entire town.
Yeah,
So I wanted to make sure that a person might pop up at some moment, and for whatever reason, whether it's to do something, to get killed, to contribute in some way. And maybe that's not a major character, but that is probably somebody that I have mentioned at some point in the first 2 books, or that has made a small appearance at some point, because that's what happens when you live in a small town. Like, you might have your core group of people, but all of these other people kind of pop in and out of your life at random times. So that's how I wanted to illustrate that. Like, it's not necessary for you to know, oh, this person is the person that I saw in book 1 appear for exactly 1 paragraph. You don't
yeah,
need to
yeah,
know that. But if somebody might be inclined to say, okay, I've read it all, I want to read the whole thing again, they might go back and go like, oh wait, this is that guy. That's so cool. So it's
yeah,
those
yeah,
little Easter eggs that I wanted to drop
yeah. And I think you do that very well. I know I've been saying that a lot already this morning, but it's
there.
true. You've done it very, very well. And the thing with book 3 is it really is a page turner. So even though it's quite thick, you can get through it quite fast. Um, I mean, it is extremely thick. And when I
That's
saw
what he
the
said.
no, no, stop, stop, stop. And but
Sorry.
when I got the proof copy, I didn't realize, because obviously before that I'd just seen the PDF and the EPUB, and then when I got the physical paperback, I was like, holy hell, this is, when you see it in person, it's a different experience, obviously. And I just thought, whoa. But I read that whole thing in like 3 days when I was, like it took me a long
I
time in.
remember.
It was between sittings, but each sitting, it just took me like 3 days to do it. And it was just such a fast read. So the pacing in it is incredible. So really well done. Now, I do have some questions for you that I pre prepared. I think
Sure.
we've already talked about the first one about did you envision the entire trilogy? So we've sort of talked through that one already. Now, the second question I had
One
was.
second, one second, one second, one second. Sorry, it's just that my I connected the headphones and they just lost battery because yay, I didn't prepare. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
And how do I change the audio on this thing? Can you talk? See if I can hear you.
Hello, hello.
No. Oh God, I'm sorry.
I have no idea. Well, you can't hear me anyway, but I have no idea how to. Um,
Okay, I can. I think I can hear you now. Just one second. Okay.
hello, 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 hello.
Isn't it fun when this happens? That's just. Oh God.
Okay, we're recording again. So today must be just the day of technical problems, I swear. So anyhow, my question. So I know some of the characters are based on people you've encountered in your past. Which is your favorite and which do you love to hate?
So I think it's pretty obvious that my favorite character is Barry, and I
Totally Barry.
did not expect to say that, but it has evolved. By book two, I would have said Jets. Uh, by now, I would say Barry,
Yeah.
uh, because again, without any spoilers, I think I value characters based on uh, their arc and the growth that they show throughout the story and the changes that they show throughout the story. And I think that's the character that I had the most fun with, exploring so many things about his past, about his life, about his acceptance of himself, the way his life has been changing lately. So I I definitely love Barry. Second place, Jess. And the person I love to hate. Oh God, that's tough. So I think it would be very easy to say Martha, mother, because she's like the main villain.
Yeah.
But I guess it's Freddy
Yeah.
because the thing about Freddy is that I don't really hate him as a character. But because of the type of character he is, he gets away with a lot of things that other characters wouldn't.
Yeah.
Uh, so he does say some truly messed up stuff during the book, and does some truly messed up stuff in the book. Um, but it becomes this love hate thing because uh, of everything he's gone through and the fact that he's just mentally unstable, and he's always
Mm,
been kind of this person that doesn't filter what he says before he says it. So it's
yeah.
fun to write a character that doesn't have a filter and just has fun with not having a filter.
Yeah.
So that's probably why.
I think with Freddy as well, he's quite a complex character. Obviously, he does do extremely evil and vile things throughout the course of the trilogy, but we also see glimpses of his humanity
Yeah,
coming through different times, and it sort of softens him a little bit. But then it was hard for me as a reader to reconcile that because I'm like, how can I feel not sorry for him, but how can I feel empathy for this guy when he's doing all these incredibly horrible things? But he has been so manipulated for a long time, and he's lived under that shadow of the Parham curse, and for his whole life, and you sort of that, but then you're like, but does that excuse his behavior? Not really, like not at all. Um, but there's still that part of me that's like, turn a new leaf, buddy.
yeah,
Try something else.
yeah, and in his case, it's that thing that I was talking about cycles. I think it's very heavy in that character in particular because
Yeah.
he's not just dealing with his own cycles of trauma, but his entire family, like going back to the 1800s, and
Mm,
uh, the issue with him is that when what happens to him as a child happens, uh, he he had already been buying into the whole "your family is cursed" thing,
mm,
and at that point he was like, "Okay, yes, we are totally 100% cursed. So why the hell should I even bother trying uh,
yeah.
to be a decent person?" And that makes it difficult for him to break that cycle. The fact that uh, instead of saying I'm going to break the cycle, he decides to embrace it, and he decides to say, you know what, I'm cursed, so I'm just going to do whatever.
Yeah.
But
And
there's another part of him that goes like, but my family, you know, and I want to also change this thing about my family, but I'm also buying into that thing.
Yeah, and it's kind of that, you know, it almost feels like at times that it's out of his control, and that this is his fate or his destiny or something like that. And then at other times it's like he could just choose to do the right thing here, and then you think he might do that, and then he just doesn't. So
And and he is given several chances, like even in the very
so
first
many
book.
chances.
Yeah, even before everything kicks off during the first book, John Hitch comes over to him and says, "I can let you out. There's a boat right outside in the dock. You can just take that, go somewhere else, live your life, just
Yeah,
get out of here."
yeah,
And he just doesn't.
yeah. So yeah, he's a very interesting character, and I love the young Freddy as well. When you go back in time to the 90s,
Mm.
and he's such a little smart ass, and you know, and everyone's just like, "Shut up, will you?" And yet they still embrace him as a friend, which I find really interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting because as you go through the story, you realize that he does see, well, at least when he's a teenager, when he's a child, he does also see the others as friends, with
Yeah,
one glaring exception. But he does actually care for the others at varying levels, you know. But it's like this idea of this group of people in which they just don't care that he's kind of an a-hole sometimes.
yeah,
They don't mind that he just says some horrible stuff and some reprehensible stuff. They just go like, "Dude, just shut up, don't say that." Um, but they embrace him as a friend, so it's kind of tragic that he ends up being Martha's pawn, to put it that way. Uh,
yeah.
because he ends up, I mean, I would say he ends up doing more damage than Martha herself, at least as far as we are in the story right now,
Mm.
before book three. And it's all because he just embraced the fact that he's cursed, and that's not going to change.
It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, though, in a way. Like, you know,
Exactly.
telling him he's cursed, and then he's like, "Oh, okay, so I'm cursed," and then he goes and lives out the curse, which he didn't have to do in the first place. So it's
Yeah,
kind of
and you have people like Bobby who, you know, during the 25 plus, almost 30 years that he has been locked up in you know, in the psychiatric hospital, Bobby has been trying to help him, and you kind of wonder, like, dude, you have your best friend trying to help, you know, fix whatever's wrong with you. Why don't you just try to put a little bit of effort? But he just doesn't even take Bobby seriously. Uh,
yeah,
and it's this whole thing of people saying, "Freddie, stop! Freddie, stop! Freddie, stop!" And he just doubles down.
yeah. So, all right. So thinking about the group of characters as kids leads into my next question. So some of the discussions that we've had and that I've had with Lee as well, there are a lot of sort of Stranger Things vibes in that particular area. They're going around on their bikes a lot, and this whole group of friends uncovering like this, you know, darkness in the town and that sort of thing. So, is that an intentional thing on your part? And if so, what made you choose to trace the history of these characters across those time periods?
So it's an indirect relation because Stranger Things was very heavily influenced by Stephen King's It,
Yeah.
uh, and I would say that that and things like the Goonies, like the Sandlot, things like that are like heavier influences in White Harbor than Stranger Things. But the
Hmm.
very fact that Stranger Things is so influenced by It and the Goonies, you know, create that relation. And then there's an additional one, which is, well, again, the one of my main influences has always been Silent Hill. and Stranger Things, and this is something that the Duffer brothers, the producers of Stranger Things, said, is that one of their main influences is Silent Hill. Um,
Mm.
so then it's like their two main influences are also two of my main influences. So that's why it creates that link there. But I love Stranger Things, but I wouldn't say it was exactly an
It wasn't a
influence
conscious
more
thing.
than it and Silent Hill.
Yeah, yeah. And so one of the things that I've always been curious about, and I don't think I've asked you this ever, is about the different time periods, because I've done this before in some of my work as well. And I wondered what your rationale was for doing all those flashbacks to when they were kids, rather than just setting the story purely in the 2020s.
So in that case, it had to do again with the theme of cycles, and it wasn't just focused on the characters, but on the town itself. So the tagline, and this is one thing I've said, the tagline, even from the first book, is there are events that sour a place, turn it into a hole in the world, which is the title of the third book. But
Yeah.
so the idea is that yes, these people are stuck in a cycle caused by trauma. So we get to see them as kids and as adults to see where the trauma started and what it's made them and whether they're able to break out of that cycle or not. But the town itself is also a character.
Yeah.
White Harbor is also a character. So that's why I needed to go further back to show where the cycle of trauma within the town started, because this is one of the people that were like my beta readers, JC Morris, uh, who's also an awesome author and people definitely should read him. One of the things he kept asking me, particularly during the third book, was why don't they just get out? Why I mean, why don't these people just pick up their stuff and leave? uh, and they don't, because that's part of the cycle. I mean, as a community, they're stuck in that cycle, and that's also part of the influence that I got from my own hometown. And one thing that I believe I haven't mentioned again since book one, like my own hometown of Siquirres, um, my friends and I had this idea of, if you get out of Siquirres, that means you succeeded in life. If you
Mm.
stayed in Siquirres, you got stuck. And this is not something fair to my friends who still live there to say that, but that was the idea we had as kids.
Yeah.
So when we did get out of Siquirres, there was always that questioning of, why doesn't this person get out? And why doesn't this person get out? And in some cases, it was because of financial situations or things like that. And in other cases, it was just because of conformity, because people just go like, you know what, I'm okay here. Yes, it's a messed up place, but I'm okay here, so I'm going to stay here.
Mm.
So that was again, I ramble a lot, but that was my way of answering the question of the timelines. So
Yeah.
the cycles of trauma for the characters and for the entire town itself.
Yeah, okay. That's I think the thing about cycles makes a lot of sense, especially if you read, cover to cover from book 1 to book 3. Um and yeah, I was thinking about that as you were talking, and sort of how you go through um to the 1800s, and then to the 1990s, and so forth. And I sort of like, there's a little bit of duality going on, and I think that's also part of the cycle,
Mhm.
or the cycles that you talk about. So yeah, it's very interesting. I know that that sort of sounds a little bit, oh, that's interesting, but it actually is very interesting to sort of read
Yeah,
books
and if
like
we
this.
look, for example, at a character like Barry, and I don't think with this I'm actually spoiling anything from book three, because I don't think so. But um, in the case of Barry, if you look at his development when he was a kid, not even
Mm.
looking at him as an adult, uh, as a kid, he took like big steps, long strides. You could almost see him get to a point in which he could break his cycle when he was a kid. and in big part by becoming friends with Peter, by becoming friends with Ray, and by this kind of rapport that was developed with Ray when they were kids. So he could have had an entirely different life if he had just embraced that. But then you get to the point in which he's an adult and you're like, oh, so he didn't. He ended up, you know, just going back into his what he calls his prison, and he decided to stay there. And then now we have to see if he decided to break out or stay there or what happens with him. So it's that's the thing I wanted to do, like see compare them when they were kids and when they were adults. And one character that goes back all the way to the 1800s, aside from Freddie's family, is Ben Curley, John Hitch. That in book 2, we were told or hinted at the fact that either they were related or they were even possibly the same person, but that was not explored in book 2. So that's a thing that is important in going back to the 1800s, because we have this character that was long-lived John Ellis, and that nickname ended up being very prophetic in a way. And that's another one of the big cycles that need to be broken. And that's a character that did catch me by surprise, because that's a character that I didn't expect to grow as big as he did. I didn't expect that character. Well, when I was planning, I had his arc ready, but his arc was expected to end a lot sooner than it ended up. And the reason is that I started seeing, like, okay, so if my theme is cycles, what happens to a person who doesn't even know what their cycle is? What happens to a person who doesn't know the good that he used to have? And he actually keeps trying to break a cycle, but by doing all the wrong things. And so that's that character, and it's been going on since the 1800s.
Yeah, I think I liked John Ellis personally. Like, I'm not sure I'd go and have a beer with him or anything, but I liked him as a character. And one of the things I really liked about him was that he is a queer character in the 1800s, and how you sort of do go through, that silence of his relationship and the secrecy and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's what sort of I gravitated towards with his character, because I just thought, even today, people go through that, and the way that you wrote it was, I think, quite authentic for the time that it was set, based on what I might and might not know about history. But it's also, in a way, sort of a universal thing, because people still suffer that way today. And I think that's what made his character particularly so profound for me and his situation. So you did that very, very well.
Thank you. And yes, I mean, and one thing that's important about that character is that and this is from book 1, again, not a spoiler. So it's the type of character that, because of his circumstances and because of trying to hold on to this beautiful thing that he had back then, he ended up doing something horrible, something reprehensible, something that you really can't justify in any way. And what he ended up doing was, well, the situation he's in right now, in which he keeps trying to end this thing because that's the only way in which he can rest.
But it does sort of make you wonder.
And you actually have to wonder, was that necessary? Could he have stopped this, or was it with it?
But I guess you also have to wonder, if you were in that situation, what would you have done? Because we always like to sit on our high horses from a distance and say, well, that was very wrong. But then if we're in an extremely difficult situation and highly emotional, and what would we do? And I don't think any of us really know the answer to that. And that I tend to think about those things when I'm reading characters like John Ellis, because yeah, I always sit there when I'm watching movies and reading books, and well, that is reprehensible, and I would never do that. But would I? I don't know.
I mean, it's difficult because I mean, it's the kind of situation in which you do something horrible because of to avoid harm coming to someone you love.
Yeah, the
Um,
good intentions sort of thing.
exactly. So the best intentions, but then you have to wonder just how well that pays off. So one thing that inspired that question, I didn't do it the same way, definitely, but one thing that inspired that was so The Last of Us, the video game, and well, now the series. This situation of uh, you could save mankind, or you could save this one person that is your shining light in a horrible world.
Mm.
uh, would you save mankind, or would you save you know this one person? And uh, depending on the person's circumstances, and in his case, given the life that he had, he ended up making the decision that ended up harming another person. And so he is a very complex character, and he's a character that I love very much. One of the things that I'm very happy about, that I'll say about the editing process, was that the closing scene for that character, I was so happy that I had the chance to how would I say it, like, rewrite it when I was doing the edit during my very last edit, because I was like, yes, this is good, but I don't think this gets the point across the way I want it. And that was one of the things in which I was like, no, I think this can be better. I think the message can be better, and it can be clearer. Uh, and I think that ended up being one of my favorite conclusions to the story. Again, whether he lives or dies, whether he does something good or something bad, I think ultimately is what best serves the character.
Yeah, and we won't say what he does because people will have to read it and find out. So, speaking of or thinking about queerness in the series, one of the things that we talked about a lot was Barry and Ray, and the unraveling of Barry's truth as a gay man. So, how important is that subplot to you, and why?
Okay, so this is something that happens all over the world, but I have seen it here in Costa Rica. Since I'm in Latin America, Latin America still has a lot of strides to make when it comes to gay acceptance and queer acceptance in general. And one of the most common things that happens is that you have gay men who end up getting married to a woman, having children, having a life, and kind of accepting that that is their role in the world.
Mm.
Uh, and I have known so many that, I don't know, in their 40s, in their 50s, finally explode and just go, you know what? This is not me. I want to live my life this way.
Yeah.
But what I've also seen is that they do it in varying levels of success. I have seen the kind that do that and then end up being super happy. And then the other ones that do that, and life just gets even more complicated and horrible, and things just get bad. Because what I feel is, when you lie to yourself about who you are,
Mm.
and you involve other people, in this case a wife, children, family, because you're lying to yourself, you end up hurting those people. So Barry is kind of an amalgam of different people that I have met, um, and different circumstances that they have gone through. The funny thing is that the main influence for Barry was, so how do I say this without spoiling anything? Like, was a case in which the person didn't even try to explore it. They just went back into their little cocoon, into their little prison, despite the abuse that they were suffering at home and everything.
Yeah.
So I wanted to explore somebody that would not do that, who would come out, and then having all of these complications come on top of them. And then it was like, okay, so do they have the strength to push forward, or do they retreat back into their cocoon?
Yeah. And I think stories or, plots like that are really important for our community, or the queer community in general. Because even here, in Australia.
One thing I wanted to mention, and that's it, because we're talking about marriage between a queer person and somebody of the opposite sex. One important thing, or the opposite gender. I'm sorry. Um, One important thing for me, and that's why I did that in book two, is that when it all comes out, Jess actually asks Barry, "So, are you gay, bi? What is it?" And based on his reaction, she goes like, "Oh, I'm gay all the way. I see." Because I mean, he could have been bi. He could have been a bisexual man choosing to have a relationship with a woman, and
Yeah.
being happy within his marriage with a woman, and that's perfectly valid. But in his very specific case, he's not. He's gay, and he's just repressing everything.
Yeah. So no, I think that's a useful point to make. I was just going to say, even in Australia, where people often think that we're quite free and liberated or something, but it's just not the case with many queer people. I'm quite lucky with what my experience has been, but because I do have an affinity towards older men, I've often encountered a lot of people on apps and things in the past who are married and they are having this sort of second secret life. And I've known, I don't know the exact number, but I've known a handful who ended up ending their own lives because the prospect of coming out and the difficulty that they perceived that to have was just too much. It was just too overwhelming, and that was the only way that they chose. That was their way out. So I think stories like the plot points that you have for Barry and Ray are actually really important. Even though it's fiction, it's definitely grounded in reality and too many people's realities, unfortunately. So I think it's really important to shine a light on that sort of thing. Whether he had come out to become, to say he was bi, or whether he'd come out to say he was pan or asexual, whatever. I think the outcome of him being gay is less important than the fact that he's gone through this journey to discover he's not straight and something needs to change, and that he actually can take control of that and has the power to make that change himself. So I think it's a really important narrative within the White Harbor universe.
Yeah, because to your point, let's say, for example, that Barry had been bi or had been pan or ace, his relationship with a woman, that would have been valid. But if he's, how would I say it? Like, if he's denying the fact that he's bi, pan, or ace, uh, is what would be causing him
Yeah.
unhappiness. The fact that he can't live his truth in his marriage, because I know a lot of people who are bi, pan, ace, and they're in a relationship, but they're being honest with their partner, so they're able to live their lives fully without needing to repress it. But in the case of Barry, I think even if he had been bi or pan or ace, his fear of other people's judgment would have pushed him to hide that, to not even say that. I mean, he would be
Yeah.
playing the fully heterosexual, non-queer man, just because he wanted to avoid the judgment.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like the fact that the fear of that judgment still exists really says a lot. It speaks volumes about how little progress societies around the world have come with queer acceptance. So yeah, really, that's a really powerful plot point for me when I read it. And I remember during the editing, there were a couple of scenes where I was like, we really just don't need like another sex scene or whatever it was that we were having. I'm like, I love their relationship, but we just don't need, all of this stuff about them. Because for me, when I was reading it, sometimes the more detail you went into with their relationship, um, it watered it down a little bit, which is the opposite of what I think you were trying to do. And I think the way it's ended up is just perfect. So I'm
Yeah, I knew that. Like for example, in book 2, I did want to have that scene. That scene between them, because it's literally the very first time he's with a man.
yeah,
Um, in later on in book 3, even though it happened, uh, I did do the fade to black and let's come back after thing, because it wasn't necessary. It would have been gratuitous, and I don't want anything I put in the book to be gratuitous.
yeah. Okay, so one more question, and I'm not sure what the answer is going to be to this one, to be honest. So I'm curious what you're going to say. So, are you done with White Harbor, or can readers expect more from this universe?
So from this particular story, in this particular reality, yes, it's done.
Oh,
But White Harbor will appear again in my stories. I think, for example, like even though my the next story that I'm writing, even though I just have like a very very short prologue to it, um, the next story I'm writing has absolutely nothing to do with this one, and it's even an entirely different style of horror. But I made this. How would I say it? Like, so it starts with people renting a new place. And when they look at the address, you get the street, White Harbor, Oregon, and that's it.
yeah.
That's literally the only reference to White Harbor you get in that story. In
Mm-hmm.
another one, it can be an entirely different thing
Yeah.
happening within White Harbor with something more akin to this one. But I do want to make sure that I do keep White Harbor there as kind of like an anthology series of stories that, even though they might not be directly related, there will be that little thing that will make you wonder, like, how does this fit in?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's really cool. I've been trying to do that a little bit with my character of Shelley from The Count. She's a real estate agent, and she's appeared in another story very briefly. She sold some guy a lighthouse, and in that story, she was just very much, I'm Shelley. Here's the lighthouse. Have a look. But then when you read The Count, you're like, oh, she's the same character, and I kind of think that that's kind of cool. So I love that you're sort of keeping White Harbor alive in these different ways with little Easter eggs and stuff like that. That's really cool.
Yeah, because I again, I'm not going to spoil anything about book 3, but this has been the plan all along, like having different stories told in different incarnations of White Harbor, and
Yeah,
whether the town or the city or uh, I mean, I even have like one little sketch of a story that I want to do later that is a prison named, you know, White Harbor Penitentiary, things like that. So I want to keep it alive that way, but not necessarily go back to these characters in this world. And
yeah,
yeah, so I will give you one thing I did for another future stories is that right now I have so I had 6 possible stories that would be my next, and I went with the shorter one because I want to write something shorter this time. But there's one, and this is an Easter egg from that one that I'm spoiling since now. Like at one point, two characters are in a birthday party, you know, and they the birthday guy invited like his neighbors and everything, and he's introducing his coworker to everybody. He's like, "Oh, this is my cousin. This is oh, these are my two neighbors, Barry and Ray." You know, so they're
Oh,
there, but these are two old guys that have been together for like 40 years,
yeah,
and
yeah,
they don't factor into the story at all. They're just there.
yeah. So yeah, it's kind of like, is that how they ended, or is it just coincidental that they're Barry and Ray?
Well,
Who
just
knows?
the reason I feel comfortable saying this here is because it has nothing to do with this story. So that
Yeah,
would be an entirely different reality. So
yeah.
these are a version of Barry and Ray that got together in college and have been together since. Period.
Oh. I do love them as a couple. I think everyone knows that I love bears, and Barry is definitely a bear. So I want nothing but the best for Barry.
Well, you know, at least in that story, he is very happy.
Oh,
People need to find out what happens in this one
yeah,
if he's happy. Again, me trying to go everywhere to avoid spoilers.
yeah.
Um,
It's so hard, isn't it?
yeah, but yeah, no, it's kind of my. I kind of introduced the concept in book two, in which he mentioned something like he believes in other realities and other universes. So this was kind of that Easter egg that I included in that uh, other story was my way of saying, yes, I mean maybe these are two guys that just had a very normal life and just got together and we're happy and they're just the neighbors. They're there. They have nothing to do with this story because there's no drama in their life. Period.
Yeah, yeah, and that would be really nice.
Yeah.
So I think that's about the end of it, then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Was there anything else about White Harbor or book three that you wanted to say before we say goodbye?
Okay, so I'll say I know it's intimidating when you look at a book and it's that thick. I mean, it's not as long as Stephen King's It, so that makes me happy. I avoided that by like 100 pages, um, but believe me, it will be worth it. Like if you
It
read
really
the
is.
story, if you read the other two books, this book will make everything you read before worth it. And whether things turn out okay or not for any of the individual characters or for everybody, uh, you will see that it's the right ending for this story. And you will be happy that you read the other two. So if you haven't read the other two, go get them now, start reading them. I don't think I will ever write another trilogy in my life. Uh, so some authors start with Carrie, other authors start with The Stand. I started with The Stand.
I
Um,
I was going to start, The Haunting of Harry Peck. That was intended to be a trilogy, and after I finished the first one, I just went, "Nah, I'm done." So I don't like doing
a book
sequels.
that I really want to read. I have it in my Kindle, but the thing is, my TBR is insane, but I do have it. Uh,
Everyone's insane.
yeah,
So
I
yeah, but
it looks insane. I mean, the concept is crazy, and I love it. So I can't wait.
well, yeah, I don't do sequels. I'm astounded by people who can do really worthwhile sequels, because once I've got, people have asked for a sequel to Ravens Creek and The Count and everything, and I'm just like, no, like I could, there's potential there, but I'm done with that world. And so I'm actually kind of in awe of people who do really, really worthwhile sequels. And you not only did one, but you did two. And you've made this whole universe of White Harbor that is just so compelling. So, yeah, really, I'm super excited that you came to Slashik with this, and I'm super proud that we have published it. So, yeah.
You guys are awesome, and believe me, if I am more than aware that if it weren't for you, I I mean for you and Lee for Slashik in general, I wouldn't have reached the audience that I've reached, and most likely I wouldn't have met some of the awesome authors that I have met through you guys. Stephanie Sanders Jacobs, Kisto Healy, Michael Collins, um, you know, uh, Elton Skelter, all of these people and other awesome people that I've met through you guys, and that has been amazing. You guys have made my dream come true.
Stop.
And on the comment you said about sequels, technically they're not sequels. They're all one story in 3 books.
Oh, I know, but it's like
Ever write a sequel to this. This is
no,
dumb.
but yeah. So, for anyone who is interested, you can purchase the ebook only from Kindle, and you can purchase the paperback from Amazon and like any other bookstore pretty much worldwide. So it comes out October 15. So I know we're a couple of days ahead. But yeah, so once the 15th comes, we'll be posting on our socials about the release, and please go pre-order now or purchase on the release day. You seriously will not regret it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Carlos, for the launch.
Thank you.
It's nearly midday here because I got the time all wrong for the launch, so I'm an hour behind. And Paul's been patiently sitting out in the living room waiting for me. He's so sweet. He's just like,
Oh.
I can just imagine him. He's probably just on his phone, like.
Tell him I really appreciate it, and thank you so much for putting up with me rambling, because I know I ramble.
No, you were fine. You're absolutely fine. So, and I'm glad that we managed to get through all the technical difficulties.
Thank you.
All right. Well, you enjoy your evening, and I'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And record.